We're going to take a look at Isiah Pacheco over the past couple of weeks. He's certainly earning a lot more volume and production with the Kansas City Chiefs offense as the lead back. Let's see how he's doing. Pacheco here, you're going to watch a 3-yard gain where he tries to cut it back and bend it to the backside here, and he slips a little bit. Now, this is oftentimes indicative of a player who hasn't quite gotten the refinement yet with certain types of footwork patterns. And one of those is being able to take that step and really begin to pivot. It's too short of a step, and he winds up kind of hitting the toe into the ground and slipping as a result, and slipping and sliding. You want to see him really be able to plant this step here a little bit longer, a little more angled towards the right side, and it comes up a little bit short and he slips here. But he has the right idea in terms of what you want to see him do, which is understand that this is going to be a cutback run and that he's reading the leverage. He sees all the defender hats towards the left side, and he starts to try and bend this downhill and stair step his way to the backside, meaning that he bends downhill and gets these defenders who are in front of him to buy towards heading to the left, and they do, and then make that bend back inside. And he just slips. He's got to get a little bit more familiar with that footwork. The positive with Isiah Pacheco that we've always known coming out of Rutgers is that he has excellent speed and acceleration, and he runs hard, and he's familiar with gap concepts. And this is a counter play where you have two pulling guards, and you're facing a defense that has basically two safeties, outside the box here, and more of a nickel type of look. And you can see him work behind his pullers, find the crease downhill, and he does a good job of cutting back to the back shoulder of that puller, finding the lane and weaving his way towards and then away from the safety to kind of press and then bounce. And he finishes hard. And what I like is watch the feet too. Here's the press again, press and then bounce back out, and then keeping the feet high through the stretch. See how he lifts the knees high right here? And then when he gets wrapped, knees stay high. That helps him get that extra yards. He's not particularly powerful in the range of what you would say compared to other lead runners in the NFL, but he finishes strong, and he understands how to finish in terms of the leg drive, the knees high, to be a tough out. Let's take a look at it through the crease here. You're going to see he does a good job, once again, of following the back shoulder of his backside puller right here. See, he's staying on the back shoulder here, and he sees the crease. He reads the leverage pretty quickly here, so he just takes that. So the fact that he's making quick decisions on gap plays kind of fits into the idea that he's familiar with the gap plays more than he is with certain zone looks. So as he's taking the exchange, he sees the penetration off the edge here, and he knows that this is the front side puller's already in the backfield having to take on a blocker. So he's already looking downhill here. He reads the hats on hats here, and the leverage is to the left side, so he takes it right up the middle and then bends outside in. That allows him to pull away, high knees to get through, and then high knees to continue after the contact. Here's an example of good footwork where he's comfortable again in the gap scheme. And you're going to see pullers, but there's going to be penetration that arrives right up the middle from the run stunting defensive tackle, right up the middle. And watch what Pacheco does. See how he opens his hips by pointing the toe to the boundary? Very good job efficiently doing it. He doesn't take any extra steps or jump cuts to do it. It's basically plants the foot, opens the hips with the toe point, and gets outside very quickly, beats the stunting defensive tackle, and then he makes a nice transition downhill. Watch the transition downhill right here. Really one-step transition downhill. This is a good skill. A lot of backs can only do this with a sideline track to a downhill track in 2 steps. He does it really in about 1, and then finishes strong here again. Takes the contact, bounces off the contact from the linebacker right here, gets hit and wrapped, is able to pull through some of it and get another 2 to 3 extra yards. And you see some comfort with him being able to get skinny through a crease, which is important and expected when you played at Rutgers. Probably weaker offensive lines in terms of matchups with other Big Ten opponents. And you can see here on this zone play that he does a good job of kind of pressing, seeing the edge leverage here by the defensive end linebacker. And he does a good job taking it back inside and then making sure that he squeezes through and away from the reach of 56 to at least extend forward for a positive gain. This is another important facet of Pacheco's game that you need to see, and he hasn't been doing this earlier in his rookie year, which is taking what the defense gives you. He's backed up in his own territory here. You see that he's got a fullback who's winding across inside with a double team inside, and he sees the crease, but 49 has got the leverage here. And it's easy in the past for him to want to try and bounce this or cut this back, but he would cut it back into an unblocked defender like number 9 here. Instead, he understands what he has to do. He tries to make a little bit of a move to look to the outside, sees that's taken, and then just drops the pads right there and takes what he can get. And this is important. He gets 5 yards on this play, but he keeps his offense on schedule instead of trying to bounce it outside, where if he bounces it outside here, 24's there. If he bounces out here, number 9's here, and he's been stuffed for losses or minimal gains in situations where he could have just been decisive or decisive at the right moment like he is right here and just drop the pads and take what he can get and push. Good work. That's maturity there. Now, one of the good things about Pacheco that we always knew coming in is he is fast and he's good to get around the edge. He just relied upon that too much. Here on this counter play, you're going to see him recognize, as he's following kind of between the two pullers at this point, that there's edge penetration to the gap that he wants to head to, but he presses it at least another 2 steps and then is able to know that he can bounce it outside, and he kind of stair steps that bounce to get away from the defensive end who's playing the containment outside, and that force player right there. He kind of bends it a little bit more downhill right there. So he bends it downhill, reinforces the edge containment to continue downhill rather than spilling to the outside, and then he stair steps it away, and that gets him the first down. So this is wise running on Pacheco's part, but it's also him leaning on the speed and quickness that he has to get outside. In the NFL, you have to be better with angles, and he's getting better with angles, understanding I've got to press this and keep this man downhill rather than fanning out, and then I can get around him that way. Mature use of speed. Here's another great example of a mature use of speed. Just a couple of plays later, you see him working downhill. You can see that the linebacker has a nice lane to the edge, and if Pacheco just tries to go straight through to that edge, he's going to get wrapped up pretty early. But instead, he does bounce it down or press it downhill and then makes the bounce. And because he presses it downhill like this, as you can see, when he does that, the linebacker is going to climb, or it gives the linebacker time to at least stop. It forces the linebacker to stop and assess to the point that the block gets picked up. So Pacheco is now doing a better job of setting up his block and then working tight to the edge blocker and getting around it. And while 49 still tackles him, he tackles him near the sticks as opposed to near the line of scrimmage. And that's a huge difference of what pressing a crease can do. Let's take a look at it from this point of view, and you'll just see 42 right here. I mean, look at the angle he had right here if Pacheco just stayed all the way there. But Pacheco squares the pads to the line of scrimmage, forces 42 to turn inside. That gets him blocked, and then the bounce outside. And actually, it's 49 who has to make the tackle, which is the backside player right here who has to come from the backside or the middle of the field to tackle him. Where Pacheco is still a work in progress and why he's probably only going to be a single dimension back right now this year is pass protection. He's not the most reliable of the depth chart in pass protection. He's probably more reliable than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but not as reliable as Jerick McKinnon. You're going to see Derwin James coming off the edge. Pacheco understands that's who his assignment is, so that's good. He squares up, doesn't get a ton of depth, but he starts pointing to the inside a little bit there with the toe point so that he can drive to the outside. He takes the correct shoulder right here. but he gets beaten to the punch, and he gets knocked backwards into the side, and James just basically goes through Pacheco to get this. And part of it is that Pacheco overextends. See how he's overextended with his pads and head well over his knees and hips? That just gets you knocked off balance pretty quickly. You've got to be able to close the gap more so that you can get into the body with a good anchor. And he doesn't really have a strong anchor here, because when you're tipped over like that and then you get hit, you get hit high and knocked up and out, you're going to lose your balance, and that's what happens. And you can see that that development isn't linear, because even though earlier in this video you saw some plays where he took what he could get, this is one of those plays where he tries to bounce it outside. Look at the crease right here. Now, yes, 49 is probably going to be able to get past 52. You have an unblocked linebacker here who might be able to come through. But sometimes you have to understand it's about taking what you can get and get downhill and bank on that. And instead, he sees the defenders here and he just skips this hole. Like, this is a tighter crease maybe, but with these shotgun runs or pistol runs where you're working towards the side, sometimes you have to just hit this downhill as soon as possible. And because he tries to look for the outside run, he ends up, taking a short loss or no gain. But aside from the zone runs where he's still a little iffy sometimes, give him a gap play and one crease to really head downhill, and he's going to hit it hard. He may not break a lot of tackles, but he will bounce off some contact and fall forward. He will push through wraps and get at least some yardage after the wrap and pull the defender along. And a lot of that is momentum-generated power because of the burst and the high knees and the ability to force the defender to have to kind of hold and drag. This is a decisive tight crease run, and you can see it's with a gap play. When it's gap plays and it's a tight crease, he's going to be confident hitting that crease. Now, at the same time, even though the ball's high and tight here to his chest, number 2 does a great job in being able to hit that elbow and jar the ball loose. Now, the positive end of this is that this was the game prior to the Chargers game where Pacheco had still got the majority of looks. So the Chiefs feel comfortable enough with Pacheco that even though he fumbled this ball and he fumbled it in the red zone, that they didn't bench him and punish him too severely for this. So that tells you that they're confident about his ball security overall and his attention to detail. And you can see with the next carry that Pacheco gets, he's confident. He does a good job heading downhill first behind what was a double team, reads the second level, and stays tight to his blocker all the way out to the second level block, pulls through a reach, and gets a nice gain. So, again, we're seeing signs of him really getting better at staying downhill with blocks and staying tight to his blockers and working off them at each point at a time so that he's maximizing yardage. Another good example of that right here, you're going to see take it one step at a time, not try and bounce outside and get it all at once. Just incrementally work your way outside with each block. He presses outside, feels it, goes downhill through the double team, sees the defender split that double team, and then uses the straight arm to ward off the reach, and then scrape past his tight ends block right here and get downhill and finish with the pads low. Here's another zone play, and you see he does a good job here of pressing and then finding the cutback lane. And like I said, he's not powerful, but because of his speed, his quickness, and his high knees and his pad level, you have to wrap him. You just can't hit him. You can't try to knock him sideways and think that you're just going to knock him to the ground. You can't go for the kill shot here and think that you're just going to get it with him. You got to wrap him up. Here's another example of that. You're going to see that as he gets downhill here, presses, reads the leverage, gets downhill, the safety just tries to hit him, and that wrap is kind of like superfluous. Doesn't really drive through. He's trying to deliver the kill shot underneath, but Pacheco's pad level is too good for that. He's going to bounce off that kind of business right there. But again, a good linebacker wrap and it's over.